Inside the halls of San Diego State University lies a program dedicated to storytelling and pursuing the truth. Welcome to Where You At, a podcast that takes you inside the work of alumni for the School of Journalism and Media Studies at San Diego State. Our goal is to show the success of our alumni, inspire students with the stories, and connect students and alums on a pathway to journalism success. And now, here's your host, Josh Suchon.
This week on the Where You At podcast, we are remaining in America's finest city, and we are going into the NBC7 San Diego newsroom, which has a lot of San Diego State alums. We are talking broadcast journalism this week with Audra Stafford. She attended San Diego State from 1997 through 2001. She is a morning reporter and fill-in anchor for NBC7. Audra, welcome to the Where You At podcast.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. I'm excited to do this and to talk about all things SDSU and TV, film, journalism. And it's so funny that you talked about coming straight from the NBC7 San Diego newsroom, because I'm in my living room right now. We are fifth anniversary. Anniversary seems like a strange way to say it, but of the start of COVID. And this is where we spent a lot of our time doing the news during that time period. Thankfully, because of my job, I got to be out in the field a lot. So I didn't have to spend as much time in my living room, but I did have to get used to broadcasting from the comforts of home for sure.
Yeah, if there's one thing that I can kind of take away from COVID, it's, there's this thing called Zoom, and
Yes.
we can still do a lot of our jobs from it. It's not quite the same, but in some ways it's better, in some ways it's worse. But yes, we can do it somehow.
Exactly.
Well, let's talk about just sort of like a normal week for you. You can take this week if you'd like, for example, because I know that no 2 days are the same in journalism. That's part of the fun and the challenge of it. But give us some ideas about different types of stories that you work on when you're in the field, when you've been in studio this week.
So I will likely be in the field all this week. So we have two morning reporters at NBC7. The other reporter is generally our fill-in anchor when one of the anchors is out. So if she's off or if one of them is off, then it's just me out in the field. And that's the case this week. We have one of our anchors is off this week. And so I'm going to most likely be out in the field all week because of that. And because we have weather this week, which of course is a huge deal in San Diego anytime we get rain. So that's what I was covering today, kind of previewing the rain that's coming a little later today. We're getting sprinkled on a little bit. And the rest of the week is looking like it's going to be pretty wet and potentially snow in the mountains as well. So that is likely what I will be doing and talking about.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit more about weather, because San Diego weather is not crazy, but there's times that it does rain. And so it's a very dramatic look on the Weather Channel when you have a reporter out in the field and there's a hurricane or there's something that's going on. Give us some practical advice about what you wear, how you keep yourself safe, how you make sure that it's a really good visually stimulating shot for the TV news when you're out to report on the weather.
So I think the most important thing as a field reporter is that you have to kind of be prepared for anything. Your day could take you from, some days I start off and I might be in studio reporting on something, and then there's breaking news and I have to make sure that I can get out of, I don't want to go to the car crash scene or whatever it may be dressed in a dress and heels or something that I might wear in studio. So I always have backup clothes. I always have practical shoes. Some reporters will wear heels out in the field. I like to wear comfortable shoes. You don't see my feet very often. And when you do, it's usually because I am squatting down, showing you a pothole on the ground, or I'm trekking through some mud and showing you, or floodwaters or something like that, which last year in San Diego, we did get some pretty extreme weather and some very extreme flooding, historic flooding here. So I was trekking around in mud and maybe not knee deep water, but floodwaters. And so just kind of always being prepared. I also have a fire bag that goes with me pretty much everywhere, at least when we know it's going to be red flag conditions, dry, hot, windy, that has fire gear in it. I always have a baseball cap with me, my station hat, in case I need to pull my hair back because it's really windy out, whatever it may be. So it's always a good idea to kind of have just about anything with you that you can transition from one thing to another, because you really just never know where the day may take you.
I remember when I was a student and I saw this, it was a comic strip, and it had a reporter who was throwing a dart, and the dartboard had all the potential stories. And then the caption said, "Today I'm an expert in," as the person was throwing the dart. When it comes to the stories that you cover, tell us, how often do you come up with the idea to pitch them? How often is it a news director, an assignment director? How is it that you get informed, okay, quickly, Audra, we need you to run out to the field to cover this?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say most every day is, hey, Audra, we need to get you out in the field to cover this. I rarely, because I am an early morning reporter, I rarely know what my story is going to be the day before. I know today that most likely I'm going to be on weather this week because, as I said, I'm the only reporter out there in the morning, and that's the big story of the week. However, I don't know what that may mean. That may mean a big rig that jackknifes on the freeway and is backing up traffic for miles during the morning commute. That could be flooding. For our 11 a.m. newscast today was out in Sorrento Valley, and there's an area that always floods there. And it did that the other day, and a couple cars got trapped there, and it forces the road to close. And then the businesses are impacted by that because they don't have any customers. So I was talking about that. So that could be what my weather story is. You just kind of never really know. Or they may send me to the snow. I went to the snow last week and I got a heads up. I did get a heads up about that late the night before, or in the evening the night before, letting me know that, hey, there's a good chance you'll be going to the snow, so that I don't always carry my snow gear with me because snow is very rare in our local mountains. But when we know it's coming, I make sure I've got that gear ready to go as well, because you don't want to be out there without warm clothes. So every day I kind of get my heads up around 2 a.m. about what my story is going to be. And usually it comes in an email and it breaks down where I'm going to be, kind of what my focus is. And if there are stories that were done the day before or maybe last week or something on that topic, then there's kind of all the video sources and information that they can kind of pull together for me. And then I usually write my script at home and drive to the location. During COVID, we started driving separately just to keep our crews separate and prevent the spread as much as we could, so that if one person got sick, then it didn't knock out everybody. That started working out really nicely in the morning, that we could drive straight to the location instead of going to the station, pairing up with a photographer, and then driving to the location. So we've kind of continued to do that in the mornings because it's just a little more efficient.
I want to ask you about your time at San Diego.
I answered a bunch of questions there in one, I think.
Yeah, and it was all good. And I want to follow up with just one more before we talk about your time at San Diego State. And that's, I think that especially from a TV broadcasting standpoint, teamwork is such a vital part of it. So when you are with a photographer and you are in the same vehicle, whether you're driving to something that's flooding or up to the mountains, like what's the teamwork? What's the kind of like the conversations, the game plans that you'll go into in order to make sure, okay, you drive, I'll work on this, I'll write this as you edit this, or how does that teamwork come together?
It kind of depends on the story, I would say. Sometimes I am writing my story. If it's early in the morning and I've paired up because I live a little farther north, and if we're going to something that's closer to the border, then I'll meet in the middle at the station and ride with the photographer the rest of the way and save my gas and the wear and tear on my car. So in those instances, I have to leave home a little earlier. So then I'll write my script in the car while he's driving down. Usually I kind of figure out what I want for video first, so that I can let the photographer know. They shoot and edit the video. So my photographer usually will go to the station, he'll start editing, and then he'll leave to go to the location. So I need to make sure I've got what he needs so he can do his part of the job. And then I can kind of work out all the details of my script, but I at least figure out, like, I'd like to start with this shot, or I'd like to focus on these three things for this half hour. And then the next half hour, let's focus on these other three things. And that way he can get that video cut and then I can kind of write to the video. It's a little backwards. Generally, you'd want to maybe write the script first, and then they kind of cut it to match your script. But efficiency wise, in the mornings at least, it works better to do it that way.
All right, let's talk about your time at San Diego State, because what I think is interesting is that even though you wrote for the Daily Aztec, you spent a lot of time with associated students, more on the politics side or the student government side. Tell us about your work at Associated Students and maybe what you thought you were going to be doing at that part of your collegiate career.
So I first got involved with Associated Students when I was a freshman, and I think I was at freshman orientation or something like that. The first few days that I was at the university, and I lived on campus in Maya Hall at part of the Living Learning Center. And I was just introduced to it there. I remember the executive officers, one of whom was Ricardo Lara, who is now our insurance commissioner for the state of California. Pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
They came out and they talked about AS and all these different opportunities. And it's not something I thought when I looked at college that would be something I'd want to go into. I was not super into politics, but it just offered kind of unique opportunities to get involved. And I started with the External Affairs Board, which is essentially sort of the lobbying arm, or I guess that's the best way to put it, the more political arm, I guess, of the council, because that board is involved with all of the various universities throughout the Cal State system. And so we took a trip to Sacramento and we talked to lawmakers up there about issues that concerned our students. We went to meetings on different Cal State campuses and got to know what their issues were. And so that was just kind of really interesting, especially as a freshman, to kind of get to travel and learn all these different things. And then I was part of the Professional Studies and Fine Arts College Council and became a representative to the full AS Council and some other boards and committees, and then was approached about running for Vice President of Finance. And so I did and got elected. And so that was an incredible experience, because the Associated Students also, I mean, they're in charge of all the student-run fee buildings and things. So the Aztec Recreation Center, at the time it was the Cox Arena, but Viejas Arena is run by Associated Students. Your fees pay for it, the students run it. And so that was just it was a really neat experience. And I think a really good preparation for what I do now. And one of the former vice presidents of finance and presidents of Associated Students was Kevin Faulkner, who went on to become San Diego mayor. So it just interesting. And it was a good networking experience. And I learned so much. I think that was obviously I spent a lot of time with that organization. So that was definitely a huge part of my college career that I never would have thought going into SDSU, like I want to join Associated Students, but it really became such a huge part of what I did there.
So I think that the next logical question is, Kevin Faulkner decides to stay within this. You decide to go toward the journalism side.
Yeah.
What were the different series of events that made you think, you know what, I want to do journalism as opposed to staying with some form of public service government?
So I went into this career, I think it was in high school, early high school, maybe even junior high, when I decided I wanted to be an entertainment reporter when I grow up. So that was really always my aim, was to be an entertainment reporter. And so I did television and film production. So that was always my goal. And I never really strayed from that. It was just kind of an interesting other piece of it. And then obviously I have done a lot of entertainment reporting, but you really have to be flexible and pretty well-rounded in this industry. And at the time you had stations that everybody had an entertainment reporter, and that is not the case anymore. And so I do a little bit of everything now. I get to do some feature and entertainment reporting, but I'm also, the majority of my days are spent on harder news, they like to call it. So I do a little bit of everything, which keeps it interesting, certainly. But yeah, I I never had that desire to go into politics. My parents were always, where did this come from? You doing all this politics stuff, that didn't, it just wasn't something that I really thought about before, but I did really enjoy it. And I do think it kind of gave me some insight into the kinds of things that I cover often now, how city council meetings work and the process of going through all the different steps to get something from an idea to actual law or reality. I think that was kind of good preparation for all of that, for sure.
When I was a student, I remember anytime that there was a guest speaker who worked in television, they always said, if you want to work in San Diego, it's not going to happen immediately. You're going to have to move. You're going to have to move to Yuma, Bakersfield, and you'll go to San Luis Obispo, then you'll go to Reno or Sacramento, and then maybe you can move back to San Diego, or you can go to San Francisco. There was a very clear path of like what you had to do. That's not necessarily the case as much anymore. And you're an example of someone who did not have to do that, but there's still a lot of things that you've had to go through.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if you can speak to your journey of what it took for you to be able to stay in San Diego.
Yeah. So I same as you, I remember when I first started, it took 5-6 years that you had to have, speaking as maybe a reporter, to be able to even think about coming to San Diego to work at a station here. The reporters that I started out with in my career had all many years before they actually got hired in San Diego. And that's definitely not the case anymore. It's definitely, we get people that are a lot younger, maybe within 2 or 3 years, or maybe you only go to one smaller one back and you're able to work in San Diego. So the business definitely has changed. But for me, yes, I was able to stay in San Diego. I was not willing to move anywhere else. San Diego is a pretty great place to be. And my dad was in the Air Force, so we moved around when I was younger. And so I didn't have that desire of like, I have to go somewhere else and know what the weather's like and experience another place. Like I've done that. I know that San Diego is a really great place to be. It's hard to beat it. So I didn't want to leave. So I actually started behind the scenes. I got an internship while I was at San Diego State and extended it as long as I kind of could, probably a little past the semester deadline. And then finally it was like, okay, well, I have to go. And but I found out that there was going to be I was interning on the morning show. They would let me write stories for the newscast. And I got to know all the people and I discovered that, hey, they're going to have an opening. Somebody's leaving. And so I approached them and said, hey, I'm interested. And so I was able that whole summer, this was the summer before, I guess it would be my senior year, but I did 4.5, was able to work full time that whole summer writing for the morning show. And then when I went back to school in the fall, that's when I was VP of finance. And so I knew that's basically a full-time job. So I knew there wasn't a way that I could do school and be working full-time at the crack of dawn at the station. So I ended up saying, hey, I'm just not going to be able to do this, but I would love to be able to fill in, be that person that you call when someone's on vacation or somebody's out sick. And if I can do it, I'll be there. And so I did that for the next probably 1.5 years until I was done with school, and then kind of worked my way from there, worked weekends. So I started as a writer. I eventually worked my way into producing for a time. This was at the ABC station here in San Diego is where I started. And then there was a time where they switched to doing all one-man band, shoot, write, edit. They were having reporters do that and photographers learn to report. And so there was an opportunity that opened up and I was able to do that in addition to my writing, a lot on my own time, but I was able to do some entertainment reporting once in a while that I would shoot and edit those stories. And so just kind of continued to build up my resume while still working. And then eventually, and I probably could have left sooner, but I took my time, but eventually I felt like I had enough stuff where I could, I was freelancing for some other outfits, BroadwayWorld.com and California Life, which is a lifestyle news magazine type show. And so eventually I got to the point where I felt like I had enough stuff and I was comfortable enough. And I knew I didn't want to produce any more newscasts. I'd had my fill. And so I left and I didn't have a job, a definite job to go to. But within a couple of months, I was able to get my first news freelance reporting job in San Diego from connections I had met. And then kind of the rest is history.
So based on your experience and what you know about the industry now, I think this is an important question for current college students. If they do want to do something similar to the Audra path of being able to stay in San Diego, besides the advice that you just gave based on your own career, what are other really important skills that they need to know about? Maybe it's just like the hunger that they need to have. What would be your advice on, all right, if you want to really truly stay in San Diego, you better be doing this?
I think the hunger factor is huge. You definitely have to want it, and you can't take no for an answer. You have to keep pushing. And I would say be careful that you don't get stuck. It's very easy to get comfortable. And I never thought I was going to write and produce. I always wanted to do the on-air portion of it. And I ended up really liking the writing and producing. So I did that for a long time. I do think it helped my career, but I've told other people, hey, first see what you can do where you are. And if you can push to get some opportunities, because it does happen from time to time. If you're not getting those opportunities though, then you might want to leave, and you might leave and then come back very quickly, or maybe it's just going to another station that may have the opportunity that you're looking for. And right now, there's so many different avenues that need content. So if it's not happening at the station you are at, maybe it's an opportunity that's going to happen through a digital outlet or streaming or something. There's so many different things that need content now that don't have to be in such the box that of TV news. And so maybe it's just looking for what other opportunities could I do from here where I could go shoot stuff and provide content. And, there's so many different things that you could do. So it's networking. It's really looking everywhere for those opportunities because they're out there. And if all else fails, try creating your own thing. Certainly a lot of people are doing that. That's not easy either. None of it's easy, right? But I think just looking, there's so many more opportunities there now than were there when we were in school.
Yeah, the whole moonlighting thing, I think, becomes important for journalists so that you can get opportunities that you may not be getting. It also helps because you may not be getting paid as much money as you would like. I know that when I was a newspaper reporter, I was thinking, what magazines can I freelance for? What, is there a book that I can write? In my current career, play-by-play announcer for a minor league baseball team, maybe I can host a podcast for my university. Maybe I can do some writing. And so when it comes to what you did for BroadwayWorld.com, California Life, give us some insights into creating an opportunity for yourself, finding an opportunity for yourself, and sort of how you balance that as you're moonlighting here on the side.
Sure. So I'll tell you, my work with Broadway World was truly freelancing. I was not paid for that. But it was something that fulfilled a passion because I love, obviously, entertainment reporting. I especially love theater. And so it gave me experience. It gave me access to things because I had an outlet that I could provide content for. And so that gives you access to more story opportunities because they're not always going to, just because you say like, oh, I'm really interested in theater doesn't mean they're going to let you interview people and to do stories and take you backstage. But if you have an actual reputable outlet, then that's an opportunity. So I used that experience as an opportunity to continue telling stories. I had started, I said, at the ABC station where I was doing some MMJ work as an entertainment reporter. We called them digital correspondents, but it was essentially a one-man band. And so I would do some occasional entertainment reporting. Then we had a changeover in management. They really went to a more hard news focus. And so that opportunity went away. So it was like, okay, well, I have to keep doing this. I have to keep building up my reel. I have to keep doing it to fulfill, my love and my creative spirit. And so I just happened to see that Broadway World was looking for people, and they have a lot of video on their site, but they didn't really have a lot of reporters doing video pieces. But since that's what I do, I pitched it to them, and they were excited to take whatever content I was willing to send them. So I was able to cover a lot of the Broadway shows that come to town, a lot of the new work that's launched at the Old Globe and the La Jolla Playhouse. And that helped me build up my contacts with all of those entities. I also used to do a lot of stories with Disney, going up to Disneyland when they were launching new rides or new attractions or new shows, and was able to do some things with Disney Cruise Line because of those connections. So I went to their rehearsal facility in Toronto 3 times to cover the shows. That's where they launch the shows that are going to go onto the cruise ship. So when they launched a musical of Tangled, a musical of Beauty and the Beast, and a musical of Frozen, each of those times I got to go cover behind the scenes. I was one of just 3 or 4 journalists across the country that got to go do that. And then when those shows actually launched on the ships, I went for those premieres. And so just opportunities like that helped me build up my resume and kind of keep my hand in, and keep those connections up. That was huge, is I don't want to lose all these connections that I worked really hard to build. And then I started freelancing also with California Life. I was paid for a lot of my work with California Life. It was also, again, another opportunity to build up experience, and then and to kind of do a range of things, because it's a lot about different things in California. So it wasn't all just entertainment, but different kinds of things. So all of that, again, it just keeps up that experience, those contacts, kept me doing the work and getting better at my shooting and better at my editing and better at my on-camera presence too. So that when I was ready to make that move, I had all of that at my disposal to be able to show and say, hey, this is what I've done and you should hire me.
I like that story a lot. And I think it goes to show of, again, it just has to be inside you. You have to really want it. It's a credit to you that you looked for these opportunities, that you were willing to do these things, even if you're not getting paid or not getting paid a whole lot. I know that for myself, I have this balancing act of, wait a minute, I feel like I'm too old to be doing work for free. And then I try to take a step back and say, well, let's really analyze this. Is this an opportunity to do something you haven't done? Is it an opportunity to show what you can do? So it can be really frustrating. You're like, no, I want to be paid for everything.
Yes. Even in my job now, I mean, there's, I work Monday through Friday, early mornings, and often most days you're going to I do one story in the early morning and another story for our 11 a.m. newscast. That's most days. So I don't have a lot of opportunities to go do these other stories that I still really love to do. Once in a while, it's part of my job. I get to go do something cool at SeaWorld or whatever it may be on the first day of the fair, fun things like that. But I still like to tell those theater stories or stories about San Diegans who are making it in Hollywood, whatever it may be. And so sometimes I still do have to stay a little late or work on my time off to make those things happen. But it makes my heart sing to do those stories. So it makes up for like some of the other stories that don't make my heart sing quite as much.
When it comes to resume/demo reel, what is the current trend? What do you think that students should be focused on for what they put on their demo reel? Is it a whole bunch of really quick clips? Is it some longer stuff? Is it a mix of things? What's the trend in how to get your demo reel noticed?
I would say, I think the biggest thing, especially if you're looking to work in TV news, I think variety is good. I think making sure that you're not just standing in one place and talking. My husband, Joe Little, who he didn't graduate from San Diego State, but he's also a reporter at NBC7. And he's an MMJ. He's a one-man band, one of the best in the country. And he has taught at SDSU Extension. So he's kind of like an honorary alum, also because I make him be an Aztec fan too. But he teaches a lot of young journalists across the country. He's worked with students at the Daily Aztec. And so his big thing is, he says, don't be a garden gnome. So if you're putting a stand-up reel together, don't just stand there and talk. Anybody can do that. Show me something. That's why when you're on camera, you should be there to serve a purpose other than just spewing out information. So show me something, demonstrate something, point out something behind you that's why you're at that location. You should always have a reason why you are at a location. It should be relevant to whatever the story is. So being active, that's a good way. And it's going to get attention. You want things that are going to get that news director's attention. So I think that's probably number one, is just make sure that you have a purpose for being there, and that you can do something creative that's going to really stand out amongst the crowd. Yeah, I mean, I think that would be my biggest tip, is just making sure that you're there serving a purpose. You're there to show and tell, really.
Yeah, that is such outstanding advice. The only thing I want to ask, though, is that if you are a one-man band and someone's not there to follow you, as you say, okay, let's look down here as the floodwaters are coming in, is there any tips that you can do when you're a one-man band in order to make sure that you're still moving and not moving out of frame?
Again, my husband's tips, because he does a lot more of that than I have. It's been a long time, and I was not as good at it when I was doing it. But move the camera, get down put the camera on the ground by those floodwaters, and get down there and show it. It's harder to do it if you're live, potentially, although I think he's done it and others have as well. But don't be afraid to, put the camera down where the story is. Put yourself down there where the story is. Even when I'm working with a photographer, a lot of times they'll be like, hey, I'm going to squat down. Let's get down here. Let's take the camera off of the tripod and get down here where the story is. That's not every day. A lot of times, because of the nature of what I do in the early mornings, I'm talking about a court case coming up or a meeting coming up later that day. So often the only show and tell I can do is say, hey, it's going to happen here in this building, but still acknowledging that's why I'm standing in front of this building in the dark. I think it's just, don't be afraid to get down where the story is and to get creative. And sometimes it might be, if it's on the tripod and you want to start here and come over here, you can move the camera with you. Just put your hand behind it and tell them, hey, I'm going to take you over here now. There's different ways that you can do it to be creative, and all of those things will stand out, because you have to remember that a news director is looking at a lot of different reels, and they're looking for that person that's going to really pop right away. I have never been a news director. I don't know how long they take to watch things, but I've judged lots of Emmy entries and other competitions, and I've certainly consumed a lot of television. And, if something doesn't get you in the first 30 seconds, you're probably maybe you'll skip ahead and see if it gets better, but you might just turn it off and move on to the next one because you're busy. So I think getting that attention right off the bat with something interesting is going to be your best bet. And then when I've created, my demo reels have always been more entertainment focused, but, and so I'd have music and things like that, which aren't really appropriate for a news reel, but always, maybe it's, you cut off your line so that your next line kind of almost sounds like it flows from it. But think about the editing, think about the pacing, so that everything that you're doing, every second, you're keeping that attention, because you want this one to push them to the next one, to push them to the next one. You want them to watch all the way to the end and want more. So I think a lot of that's in the pacing, and have people watch it. There's a lot of people who have done this podcast who work in this business. Reach out to them or reach out to somebody that you like their work and say, hey, I really like your work. could you help me? Would you mind looking at my demo reel and giving me your advice? People in this business all started in the same place. And so they're pretty willing to help most of the time.
I want to ask you a little bit more about favorite stories that you've reported on. I know you've told us some about whether it's weather or whether it's Disney. Is there any other stories that you did where there's maybe a fun story behind the story that you think would be educational, but just also something that you look back on fondly for some reason?
Oh man, there's been so many interesting stories. That's the cool thing about this career is, like you said in the beginning, every day is different. So sometimes it's stories I wouldn't necessarily even think were going to be that exciting. Let's see. My first wildfire was pretty terrifying and also exciting and interesting. My first wildfire was the lilac fire. I forget what year that was, 2017 maybe, up in the Fallbrook area. It was one of those things where I think I may have even been on my way home, or I might not have even been working that day, but I got called to work or something because I think it was when I first started at NBC7 and wasn't full time yet. And so it was the middle of the day and I worked from about 11 a.m. to 11 or 12 at night. And I was with a very experienced photographer, thankfully, because he knew what to do. It was my first time ever being out where everything around you is burning. I'd covered wildfires as a producer back at the station. I knew the wall to wall aspect of it, where coverage is just going on and on and on. But that was my first one actually being out in the field. And so it's crazy because you literally go down a road and you see fire all around you. And it's like, where are the firefighters? There's a fire here and one here and one here. But they're focused on the big main fire and all these little spot fires. There's no way to attack every single one of them. So that was just very eye-opening. It also, in times like that, you really feel like what you do is really important because now you are talking about life and death, making sure that people know if they need to evacuate, when they need to evacuate, where they need to go, where the fire is burning now so that they can get themselves and their animals and their belongings and whatever else out. So in times like that, it's exciting because it's happening right now. And like I said, often it's not breaking news that I'm covering. It's a meeting that I'm previewing or something. And so breaking news is exciting for those reasons, but things like that, things like the floods last year, even during COVID, I was covering a lot of, as I mentioned earlier, I was out in the field because again, that's what I do. And it was something we could do pretty safely. I was at pretty much every single vaccination center that opened around the county. It was like, oh, here's another one. Here's another one. And so again, it felt like this is really important information that I'm getting out to our viewers that they need to know. People were really watching and paying attention at that time because a lot of them were stuck at home, but two, because the information was changing and evolving all the time. And so in moments like that, you really just feel like the job is so important to be there. And I felt like that was a way, I always feel like that's a way I can contribute. I'm not a firefighter. I can't be out there on the fire lines. I'm not a nurse or, a doctor. I can't help in those ways, but I can inform the public and I can give them what they need to know. And so it's nice to be able to feel like you can contribute in that way. And then on like the fun side of things, just, a lot of the Disney stories have been really fun. Got to go in the penguin encounter at SeaWorld. That was pretty cool. So a lot of just fun animal kinds of things that I've gotten to do. The fair is always a good time and all the various theater related things. I got to interview Lin-Manuel Miranda before Hamilton. But I'm a huge In the Heights fan, which was his first huge successful musical. And when it came to Los Angeles for its West Coast premiere, I was invited up for their media day, and I got to interview him actually one-on-one, separate from that, because again of those connections that I had made over the years. And so that's definitely stands out as a highlight because I'm such a fan.
When you interview someone who's a fan, or you're a fan of him or her, and I know this is really something I talk to aspiring sports journalists about, is taking yourself away from being the fanboy or the fangirl, right? And it's hard, especially when you first get started.
Sure.
When you go to an interview with Lin-Manuel, what do you try to remind yourself of, think of, so that you can still do this job? And I feel like there's like half of you that's just really excited to be there, and the other half's like, no, I really have a job to do. How do you kind of approach those types of interviews?
Oh gosh. I think one of the things that I love most about what I do, what we do, is getting to do those interviews. I'm more fascinated by the process and the creative that goes into a production. And so I'm not that I don't get starstruck, but I get starstruck at weird moments with people that I wouldn't have even thought I would. I don't know why. But I think it's more that I'm just so interested to hear what they have to say, and especially him, how his mind works. And he immediately, I think, also put me at ease. So, and I was shooting that interview by myself too. So, I was kind of focused on like making sure I hit record and don't double punch and use framed up and there's enough light and all of those things. So that probably helped a little bit too. But I think he kind of just put me at ease. So that helped.
When you said don't double pump on the record, that made me check to make sure that I did not do the same thing. And we are recording
Yes,
right here.
if it hasn't happened to you folks listening or watching yet, it will happen at some point in your career. I covered a red carpet many, many, many moons ago it was for like the soap opera Daytime Emmy Awards or something like that. But it wasn't the actual Daytime Emmys. It was a party associated with that. And Susan Lucci, who was, I don't know if she's still on soap operas now, but she was like the queen of daytime. And I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to miss her interview. So as I saw her walking up, I hit record to make sure I'd be rolling when she walked up. And then, force of habit, when I started talking to her, I hit record again and stopped that recording. So I had her walking up and I had her leaving.
Oh no.
Part of the queen is missing. Yeah.
Oh no.
That was kind of a bummer. I think I did it one or two other times with people too, for the same reason. I was anticipating and then I messed up the whole process.
So toward the end of the podcast each week, and we're starting to wrap things up here, I like to have other guests on the podcast talk about other alums. And there's a lot of SDSU alums who are in your newsroom.
Yes.
We've had a bunch of them on this podcast, Brooke and Devin and Stephen Luke. So if you want to talk about them, you can. But if you want to give a shout out to someone else who's not in your newsroom, we can approach this either different direction here as we start to wrap things up.
Yeah, so I'll start with another one who is in our newsroom, a relatively recent graduate, Angela Kurish. She graduated in 2021, and she is one of our producers. And she produces newscasts filling in. She produces a bunch of different things, but her main job is producing for our streaming channel. We call it OTT. I forget what that stands for, our fast channel. There's a lot of different names for it, but our streaming channel. And basically we have our morning newscasts. We will replay on that channel, but we want to make sure that they are up to date because a lot of people have switched from traditional broadcast and they're only streaming. So we want to make sure they're getting the same kind of product that you get if you're watching it live from 5 to 7 a.m. So there's live weather and live traffic. And if there's breaking news, then those parts of the newscast are manipulated to make sure that we do a fresh live hit. When there were some recent fires, I was doing live hits during those hours as well for the streaming channel. And so she's the one who's doing all of that and kind of putting that puzzle together to make sure that those newscasts are as fresh as possible for the viewing audience on our streaming channel. And so I want to shout out Angela. She's awesome. And then, of course, yes, Brooke and Devin and Steve Luke. And we have several others in our newsroom as well.
Even if it's not true,
San Diego.
Please tell me that there's San Diego State stuff all over the newsroom, even if it's not true.
No, there's a lot of USC people in our newsroom as well. So it's kind of like that battle back and forth there. Let's see, who else? I also want to shout out Tammy Blackburn. She was actually my mentor, my alumni mentor when I was a freshman at San Diego State, and we have kept in touch over the years, and she still works with the university and has been a huge part of the alumni association. And she's an incredible person. She also is a broadcaster for the Pac-12, and I don't know how she does it all. She also is living with stage 4 breast cancer and is just such a warrior. So I want to shout her out. Sorry, getting emotional. Let's see. Heard from Crystal Fambrini, my best friend, in a recent podcast. So we'll shout her out as well. Somebody I've had the opportunity to interview is Destin Daniel Cretton. He was not a journalism student at San Diego State. He was actually a graduate student in the film department. And he is the director of Shang-Chi, The Legend of the Ten Rings for Marvel and other Marvel movies. And he's obviously kind of a big deal and really credits his time in the San Diego State film department with helping him get to where he is now. So shout out to him. He would be a great interview if you can get on his schedule. There's so many. I have a lot of friends who started in journalism, who went to San Diego State, started in journalism, and went on to work in PR and have their own PR firms. Oh yeah, Matt Coy. I think Crystal shouted him out too. Matt Coy was in the TFM department with me, and he's traveled all over the world doing production work at the Olympics over the years. He worked for the Dallas Cowboys doing all of their in-game video production. He came and when the Padres got their gigantic video board, he came in because he had been working for the Cowboys. He came in and he was the director of all of that for the Padres for a time. He went on to Madison Square Garden and was doing it there. And he's always doing big things. So shout out to him because, yeah, he's been really doing it. So he started when he was a student and has just continued to go up and up and up from there. So many amazing SDSU alums. I could go on forever.
I'm glad that you gave so many different shout outs. And I want to close with this because as you were saying this, look, the reason why you got on my radar is because Crystal Fambrini a few weeks ago was the guest on the podcast. And listening to her and listening to you makes me think about how I just feel super grateful that the students who I met when I was at San Diego State, that I happened to meet them. And some of it was luck and some of it was just happened to be at the right place and right times. A lot of it was Daily Aztec. They're still my closest friends, but I feel like I learned so much just from my fellow students, the ones who were 1 year older than me, 2 years older than me, the guys like Eric Winter and Eric Breyer and Tim Meehan and so many more who are at the Daily Aztec who initially just got me going in the right direction. And I feel like I just gravitated to these other people who had direction, had positive energy, and I wanted to latch onto them and learn as much as I could and then hopefully try to pay that forward with those who were coming behind me. And so maybe you can just close with kind of a weird thing to say, but pick your friends wisely, surround yourself with other people who have high goals and aspirations in life.
I think that should always be the goal is to have great friends. But I always like to work with people that make me better. I don't want to necessarily be the best one on the team. I want to be surrounded with people that make me aspire to be better and to learn from them. And I watch all my stuff, not all of it, but the majority of it. I do kind of check in to see like, a lot of times it's just, how does my hair look? How does this look? Whatever. But I'm always trying to see, what can I do to be better? And so, yeah, a lot of that is who you surround yourself with, and who inspires you. And hopefully a lot of the people on this podcast inspire people. And, by the nature of the fact that we all went to San Diego State, I feel like we all have this connection. And so even if maybe we don't know each other now, that's a good in for people to say, hey, I wasn't surrounded by you before, but I like what you're about, and I want to surround myself with that now. And I did that as a student, and I try to continue to do that now, just getting involved and being around things that interest me and people that I can learn from, in whatever way that may be. Maybe it's in your personal life, maybe it's in your professional life, but yeah, I definitely think who you choose to surround yourself with certainly says a lot about you.
All right. That's a good place to wrap things up. Audra, this was super fun. Thank you so much for all of your insights and being so generous with your time.
Thank you so much for having me. This is really fun. And hopefully we can do it again when the students are available.
Yes, most definitely. Once again, that is Audra Stafford. She is a morning reporter, fill-in anchor for NBC7 San Diego. My name is Josh Suchon. I am your host. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks for listening to the Where Ya At podcast. This is Devin Watley from the class of 2021. Thanks to Martine Marine for creating the music you're hearing right now, and Alex Piscatelli for her work on the podcast name and artwork on social media. And a reminder to SDSU alums, we really want to know where you're at. Tell us about your career. Get involved in the school. There's many ways you can do this, from donating your time or money, mentoring students, to even speaking in classrooms in person or on Zoom. Your work can help us grow the program and create more opportunities for our students to succeed. Again, thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Recommend us a future guest. And go Aztecs.